What's going on, YouTube? It's your host, Rich GNT, and we're here to talk about what's going on with the NYPD. And they seem to be having a recruitment problem. And there's a little tidbit after that, because I was just having a conversation with my cousin when it came to the NYPD. And yeah, a lot of things were revealed to me. Things I probably should have known, but I just didn't know. So let's not waste any time. Let's jump right into this video.
Welcomed more than 1,000 recruits into the academy this summer, one of the largest classes in nearly a decade. But community leaders say thousands more are needed to keep crime down. Jennifer Bisram takes a closer look at one Bronx community in dire need of more officers.
We work doubles at a time, sometimes triples. You know, you're pumping caffeine through your system just to kind of keep you going.
He didn't just walk the beat. Officer Sanchez says for over 8 years, he carried the weight on his conscience every day.
You're a liability at that time. You're not even a cop. You're a liability to the department.
He worked at the NYPD's 45th Police Precinct in the Bronx until he says he just couldn't take the long hours, forced overtime, and random posts outside of his assigned precinct anymore.
The longest I've ever done continuously was about 30 hours straight.
What?
That I could remember, yeah, it was 30 hours straight.
He handed in his badge earlier this year.
You don't know what time you're getting off. You know, you have pets, you have family, you have kids. You know, you don't know exactly when you're going to see them.
Councilwoman Christy Marmorato represents the Northeast Bronx.
I've seen an increase in crime, especially in my district in the 45th precinct.
City data shows a 10% increase in major crime in the area compared to the same time last year.
It's very frustrating because my community is a very pro-NYPD community. We love to see police presence in our neighborhood.
George Havernick is a community activist and member of the 4-5 Precinct Community Council.
I have seniors telling me, I am afraid to go to the bank until my son comes to take me or my daughter comes to take me.
According to the police,
every time I go up to New York, I make sure that I walk with my older family members, you know, my aunts, my uncles, my grandmother, my grandfather, and everything like that, because I just know how it is. I mean, we're in Brooklyn, but even still, it's just one of those things I think about on a consistent basis because people in my family getting older. It's just something that weighs heavily on my mind. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this YouTube channel, because I wanted to talk about what's going on, not just in New York, but in other states as well. But to talk about what's going on, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. A lot of people talk about how the police officers are overpaid, they have all this extra overtime and everything like that. It's because they have shortages. They don't have enough people joining. And the reason for that, I think the main two reasons is that they don't have the proper support from the city and the state, because you have a lot of politicians talking about defund the police and everything like that, and making it sound that they're the ones that are the problem, which it takes two to tango. And then two, the crime. The crime is insane up there, especially in certain parts of the Bronx. Yeah. These people are putting their lives on the line. And if you don't believe me, look up any news station in New York and see how almost all the headlines are the Bronx. And Queens, me and my cousin were just talking about it. Queens is like they fighting for superiority with the Bronx when it comes to crime. It's getting wild out there. No one wants to join the police force that's not going to support you in your time of need and then deal with all the crazy shit that goes on up there.
Union, there are 136 officers assigned to the 4-5, 17 added just last month. But that's not including sick-outs and officers that get temporarily assigned to the military and other areas. For comparison, in 2020, the precinct had 164 officers.
On a daily basis, they're taking police officers to go to transit, they're taking police officers to go crime areas, and they're taking them out of those communities where, you know, they need police officers too.
PBA President Patrick Hendry says there's an ongoing staffing crisis. The city's independent budget office shows the NYPD roster at 34,455 officers compared to 40,285 officers back in 2000.
We lost over 15,000 police officers. That's a staggering number.
Hendry says they've been losing about 300 officers a month. So far this year, over 2,400 officers retired or quit. He says New York City officers need better pay, benefits, and overall quality of life.
They're staying until they get something better.
Back in northeastern Bronx, Councilwoman Marmorato has funded cameras at Ferry Point Park to help deter crime. But that's not all.
200 ring camera giveaway in both precincts, so about 400 in total. Because of auto crimes in the district, we have given away the club that locks onto the steering wheel.
As for Officer Sanchez, who now works at a department outside of New York City,
I still do kind of miss the city. I do want better for, you know, the people that are still there.
The NYPD says the department hired 2,911 recruits this year, including nearly 1,100 in August, the largest since 2016, with another one scheduled. Adding the NYPD remains laser focused on continuing our recruitment efforts and bringing in the next generation of officers.
It's sad, I mean, and I can understand his sentiment of being like, yo, I miss the city, but I gotta do what's best for me because it's a real thing. He has to do what's best for him. But let's switch gears a little bit because we're gonna jump into a news article, which I didn't know about. My cousin had told me about that. There have been a lot of cops that have been improperly hired because they didn't meet their requirements. 30 cops NYPD claims were improperly hired can keep their jobs for now. So this happened back in July. They pretty much figured out that 30 plus cops, not just 30 plus cops were improperly hired because they had issues with the background checks. They had issues with drug charges, not really drug charges, but drug usage and everything like that. And seemingly they just weren't up to the task. But now it seems like they're keeping their jobs. And based on the video we just saw, we can kind of gather why. The NYPD claims that the officers shouldn't have been hired after failing psych evaluations and background checks. Police groups say the system is biased. It is. A Manhattan Supreme Court judge on Tuesday granted 30 recently hired NYPD officers a reprieve from being fired, rejecting the department's bid to end a temporary order blocking the terminations. The NYPD told the officers last week that they had 24 hours to resign or face termination because they had been improperly hired in 2023 or 2024, after being disqualified during the application process based on psychological evaluations or background checks. The department has faulted a single inspector, Terrell Anderson, for the error, even as it says its investigation is ongoing. That's crazy. They really threw that boy under the bus. Maybe it is his fault. Who knows? The Police Benevolent Association filed a lawsuit last Thursday in Manhattan Supreme Court and won a temporary restraining order against the terminations, which was extended Tuesday by Justice Phaedra Perry Bond, who questioned why the city had been so hasty in trying to bounce the officers. These are human beings that are affected here, she said. In court papers, the NYPD said it's seeking to remove the officers after investigation by the department's Internal Affairs Bureau found in April that Anderson, the commanding officer of the Candidate Assessment Division, unilaterally cleared dozens of applicants to become officers despite their disqualifications as not psychologically fit and or because of issues uncovered during their character background investigations. Department attorneys claimed in the filings that, but for the unauthorized unilateral actions of then commanding officer of CAD, none would have been fired. This is the part that kind of bugs me a little bit. Right there where she says, these are human beings that are affected here. True, but these are human beings that have the ability to affect dozens, if not hundreds of other human beings. If they're not passing the psych tests and there are things in that background that are a little unsavory, I would imagine that the best thing for us to do is to not have them on the street with all that power and a weapon. Yeah, they're human beings. Sure. But if they're unfit, they're unfit. That's it. Anderson, who has been transferred to a housing unit, didn't respond to a request for comment. But PBA attorneys, a number of NYPD fraternal groups, and those familiar with the hiring process say the inspectors being scapegoated for trying to improve a system that has long been unfair to recruits, particularly black and brown candidates who are disqualified at higher rates than white candidates. That's very interesting because New York is pretty diverse. The police officers are pretty diverse. Not often I'm seeing like a whole lot of white cops. They say the notion that the strict paramilitary style of the NYPD could be skirted by one rogue inspector is hard to believe. True, because I said earlier that I feel like they are trying to throw them on the bus. In our view, this is a classic scapegoat scenario. One of the attorneys for the PBA, Matthew Daly, told the judge Tuesday, "It's just not plausible that nobody knew what was going on." Yeah, a whole lot of people knew. Whenever there's stuff like this, whether in big organizations or government, there's not just one point of failure. There isn't. This was multiple points of failure. A lot of people knew, if not everyone. The hiring kerfuffle comes as NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch is aiming at tightening accountability within the department following a series of scandals among top police officials, most notably former Commissioner Edward Caban and former Chief of Department Jeffrey Madry, whose homes were raided by the FBI and who both resigned late last year. Yeah, like I said, her face, I'm not even trying to be a dick, her face is just, I don't like it. It's not good. She has called for tougher disciplinary measures for those who commit certain misconduct, announced a new vehicle pursuit policy aimed at restricting the use of the dangerous tactic, and halted the department's recent practice of dismissing disciplinary cases brought by the Civilian Complaint Review Board if they are filed too close to an 18-month statute of limitations. At the same time, Tisch elevated a close associate of Madry, then Chief of Patrol John Chell, to serve as a top uniform official in the department despite a checkered disciplinary record. This includes pleading guilty to a departmental charge of federal tax evasion and a civil court jury's determination that he intentionally shot an unarmed man in 2008. Shell has said the shooting was accidental. Yeah. While the targeting of alleged improper hires is in line with Tisch house cleaning initiatives, a number of supporters of Anderson say is misguided. Eric Sanders, a civil rights attorney and former NYPD member who represents one of the 30 officers, said their situation stemmed directly from the NYPD's haphazard hiring system. There are no validated standards, no consistency, and no legal framework underpinning their qualifications, he told the city. You can't enforce rules you don't follow, and you can't scapegoat one individual for exposing dysfunction the executive staff enabled for years. That's true, but if you are also part of the kerfuffle, you can't get upset when you get singled out. Yes, you're a scapegoat. We understand that. But it's still something that you did that was wrong because they didn't qualify. Unless I'm misunderstanding something. Patrick Gordon, president of the NYPD Guardian Association, which represents black members of service, said his fraternal group has been arguing for decades that the NYPD's evaluation process is culturally biased against people of color. The psychological process has been known for cherry picking, Gordon said at a press conference that preceded the court hearing. We believe that what was cherry picked was not the cherries that the police department won this time, and that's why it's such an issue. Gordon said one of the reasons why Anderson was named commanding officer of the candidates unit was to address some of the claims of bias. He told the city, the commanding officers who served prior to Anderson also rejected recommendations for candidates to be disqualified, although less frequently. Among the police officers challenging the determination is Tyler Stratford, 34, who submitted an affidavit saying his disqualification notice from the NYPD arrived in October 2016 when he was working as a detective investigator in the office of the Brooklyn District Attorney. He says he then worked for the Brooklyn DA's office for 5 years after completing a background check, a psychological evaluation, and a drug screening. Interesting. In 2022, according to Stratford's affidavit, he was hired as an investigator for the city's Department of Corrections. On April 11, 2024, he says he was contacted by someone from the NYPD about whether he was still interested in joining the police force. 4 days later, his affidavit says Stratford sat down with the inspector and spoke about the reason he had been disqualified. Stratford says he soon got the green light to join the police academy, graduated in January, and was assigned to the 4th precinct in the Bronx, where he says he's made 20 arrests. My father retired as the first grade homicide detective after serving the NYPD for 38 years and was the inspiration for me to pursue a career as an NYPD police officer, he wrote in his affidavit. I saw over my lifetime how he committed his life to getting justice for victims, as well as the brotherhood that was formed, especially in times of vulnerability. That's all I'm going to read from this article right here. Also, I want to apologize. This Invisalign I got in my mouth makes it really hard to read at times, so sorry. I promise I'm not illiterate. To pretty much wrap this all up, look, I understand that cherry picking has been going on a lot, when it comes to especially the hiring process in New York. I understand that. I've said it on multiple different occasions. There's a lot of funky shit that goes on in New York and needs to get rooted out. Not in this case when it comes to Tyler Stratford, because seemingly he seems to be the type that's on the up and up. I'm not too sure exactly where he might have been disqualified or why he might have been disqualified, but in the case of the others, I still want to have a very heavy look into why they were disqualified, especially if they're failing psych evals and or background checks. Because for me, and if they find it's an issue that has been going on consistently, but only this time, like just what was said in here, that it was just not the cherries that they wanted picked, then that's something that has to be discussed and figured out, because we don't need people with all this power and weapons to be on the streets defending the people. We don't need that. We need people that are actually going to do what they need to do, catch bad guys and protect those who are most vulnerable. That's what we need. Well, you guys already know the drill. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Comment down below. How do you feel about the police shortages in New York? I mean, New York, just like many other big cities, has its crime problems, and the last thing they need is a police shortage. I mean, I'm not saying that these people that were disqualified or would have been disqualified because of their inabilities or deficiencies should be police officers, but I mean, something needs to give because they're not getting the numbers that they need. And subscribe if you want to see more. Peace.